4th of July is a very special day for me, not only because it's America's birthday, but because it's my Independence Day. I arrived in the States on July 4th, 1978. I came over by myself. Essentially, I was 16 years old, and I probably, looking at the pictures, looked like I was 12 years old. Didn't really have any language skills to speak of. My English vocabulary was very limited, and I didn't know anybody here. All I had was the address to the high school that I was to report to, and they were going to take care of me, put me up, and all that kind of stuff. So I arrived in Boston, Massachusetts in the early hours of morning of July 4th. And basically took a cab and gave him the address to the high school. He took me over there and let me out. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was raining really hard, and I go up to this school and I'm knocking on the door, but nobody's coming, and I have no idea why. So finally, after a few minutes, there's this older policeman who comes over, and he starts talking to me. Of course, I have no idea what he's saying, but somehow, after a while, he helped me understand that the school wasn't going to open that day. So he took me over to a hotel nearby, and I got a room and stayed there overnight and went to the high school, and sure enough, they had all the arrangements made, and they put me up in a dorm that belonged to a college nearby. So, it was really difficult for me. I kind of led a fairly sheltered life. I was, the oldest grandchild in the family, so on and so forth. I'd never really been on my own. But I was getting used to it. I remember waking up every morning and realizing all of a sudden that I was in a place where I didn't know anybody, and, basically had very limited resources. So just waking up to that dreadful feeling of being alone and homesick. Anyway, about 3 weeks after I got settled into this dorm room, the college decided that they didn't really want any of the high school students in that place because some of them were trashing the dorm or something. So they kicked all the high school students out. So the first time during my stay in the States, I was officially homeless. And I found 3 other people in the same boat, and we somehow found an apartment and signed the lease, and we moved into this 2-bedroom apartment. A couple of these guys were party animals, but one of my roommates and I got along really well, and we were always studying, doing our thing. So these other 2 kept insisting for us to go out with them and stuff like that. So one night we said, okay. So we got on a train and met them somewhere at the game room where we were playing pinball and so on and so forth. But one thing led to another, and some of the locals really didn't want us there. And on our way to the subway station on day 25 of my stay in the States, these 10 or 12 guys attacked us and essentially beat the mess out of me. And I had broken bones, and I was bloodied and stuff like that. So this was day 25. Somehow I managed to, flag down a police car and, go to the hospital and so on and so forth. So all of that was really, a painful experience. But I did what I had to do. I learned that, you do what you have to do in any circumstance. But then there was the hospital bill. $111 and some change. And I felt really bad because I had made that call to go out that night, and in retrospect I knew it was an irresponsible thing to do. So I felt like I needed to pay for that hospital bill myself rather than having my parents pay for it. So after I healed just a little bit, I took a job as a dishwasher up in Boston. And I would walk to work and back in the snow, uphill both ways. This is what I've told my kids, and I actually proved it to them a few years ago because there was actually a an overpass, and I had to go up that hill going that one way, and I had to go up the hill the other way as well. But anyway, I'd go to work at night about 6 or 7 o'clock until 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd go to school the next day. And I did that job for several weeks and basically made the money that I needed to pay the hospital bill. Then, I'd finished 11th grade in Iran, and I basically finished high school in about 3 months. It was 3 months of English language school and then 3 months of high school, but I had already had a lot of the courses in Iran. So it was time to go to college. So got some recommendations, and basically it came down to going to an engineering college in Cochran, Georgia, Middle Georgia College, which was a good sort of feeder to Georgia Tech, I found out later. So the best way to get there, the least complicated way, was to get on the Greyhound bus in Boston and get off in Cochran. So that's what I did. Got on the bus and with a friend of mine, one of the roommates, who is still a dear friend to this day. Anyway, got on the bus, and 33 hours and a backache later, we got off the bus. By that time, I had sort of developed some English language skills. I could carry on the basic conversations and so on. But when we got off the bus in Cochran, Georgia, I thought maybe we fell asleep for too long and the bus might have gone to South America, because I could no longer understand what people were saying. Basic phrases like, "How y'all doing?" I had no idea what that meant. So I had to basically learn English all over again. And so went to college in Cochran, Georgia, and eventually transferred to Georgia Tech. But while we were in Cochran in 1979, some of you may be familiar with the events in Iran during that time. Unfortunately, the hostages were taken in Iran, and it was a real mess. And many of us, there were several Iranian students actually in this college because it was kind of an engineering college, and in Iran, essentially, you're either an engineer, or you're a doctor, or you're a lawyer, or you're a loser. So it's one of those things where most of the people that were my friends at that time wanted to be an engineer, whether they had an interest or not, including myself. Anyway, so for us to be there as kind of a small group, we were a minority that was not very popular. And during the hostage crisis, the locals were not very fond of us going to the pizza parlor or other places. So there were always fights breaking out and things like that. I remember actually having, the way you could actually identify all the Iranian students was that their brooms, the broom handles were cut in half, because that was our only weapon. Because we actually, believe it or not, had people come through the dorms with shotguns looking for Iranian students. And one night there was a mob of people with pitchforks and baseball bats and shotguns that were basically out for a lynching experience, and the town police there found out about it, and they put us all in this dorm that was surrounded by people who basically demanded that they turn us over so they can kill us. So just really, now that I look back to all these experiences, I'm really grateful that I survived and really actually learned something from every one of those experiences. I think it is true that, when they say that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So anyway, survived that situation. In 1980, I think it was, just before I transferred to Georgia Tech, I worked at Six Flags for a couple of months, and that is where one of the greatest things that has ever happened to me happened, which is where I met my lovely wife. And unfortunately, at the time, I had very limited resources, and during most of that time when I worked at Six Flags, I slept in a car. Essentially, one of my friends, there were three of us working there, and one of them had a two-door Ford Capri that he was gracious enough to share with us. And our thing was that the owner of the car would sleep in the back, and the two of us, the other two, would flip a coin to see who gets the steering wheel. So it was summertime. It wasn't too hot, too cold or anything, so we could do that. During that time, I had an experience one night where basically I was left behind due to certain circumstances, and I decided that I was going to sleep in the bushes, basically, at Six Flags, right in the parking lot, because, we took our showers in the park and stuff like that. So I figured, okay, I can just hang out until tomorrow morning and I'll go to work. But unfortunately, I was discovered by the security guard and told that I couldn't stay there. So I only had the phone number of one other person in my network, if you will, in Atlanta. So I called them at like 1 o'clock in the morning. They came and got me. So had quite a few experiences as I was sort of growing up in the States. I was definitely very blessed to have a group of friends who were kind of in a similar situation. I know that my story is not so special. There are a lot of people who've experienced a lot of hardship, so I don't claim to have had a really bad life and things like that. But as I look back, I do really believe that every time something really bad happens to you, it really presents an opportunity to grow and to develop wisdom. And I mean, these are not just cliche kind of quotes on Facebook and things like that. I've had the good fortune of actually experiencing it. Having gotten beat up, having been homeless, having, gone through all kinds of adversity that really caused me to say, okay, you know what? I'm not that kid who was really overprotected and things like that. I have to grow up. I have to figure out how I can make this happen. So since then, I really have learned to look at adversity in my life in a couple of different lights. Of course, I can't help but have an immediate reaction to adversity as like, oh geez, why is this happening, and so on and so forth. I can't deny that I do that from time to time. But then the other thing that I try to be intentional about is, why is this happening? What purpose can it serve in my life? What can I learn from this, and how can I apply it? And all of those types of questions that really lead to a feeling of, look, I've been through a lot and I've made it, and I can make it through this. So that's a little bit of my story, and just wanted to share it with you guys, and I appreciate you listening.